We just finished a great conversation here with Birte Steen from Rock Consulting. We've talked about a lot of things, but one of the favorite topics was about symptoms and root causes. We went into ICPs. We talked about what is a fractional CRO. We talked about forecasting, hiring, and a lot of other stuff. Things that we might have to cut a little bit as well. But I think you're going to have a lot of insights if you listen to this podcast, and you will find us on all the channels. Cheers. Thank you for taking the time to sit with me today. I'm super excited to have a chat. I mean, we haven't met for the last 10 years. Um, and last time we met, I kind of walked out of you and you said, see ya, I'm taking a sick leave, and then never came back. And it took me, I think, 6 years. And then I felt that wasn't so nice. I kind of have to apologize, because if someone did that to me, I would be pissed. So thank you for being here and not being angry with me anymore. Appreciate that.
Of course not. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. And I actually forgot about that.
Oh, yeah, okay. I shouldn't
Yeah.
have brought it up. Typical.
No,
um,
but it's a time for everything. And then we focus on the fantastic job you did until that happened.
yes,
Right?
exactly. That's
Yeah.
good framing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I want to talk to you about. But like in the last, how long have you been a fractional CRO?
2.5 years.
And what is a fractional CRO?
It's a good question. I think a lot of it's a confusion between the interim role and also the fractional. But basically, the fractional CRO or VP of sales or a CMO, whatever role can be fractional, you're in a fraction of your time. So
Mm,
it's not a full time person coming in. So you're in there for a fraction of a time. But another area is that it's a person that has expertise in the field, a lot of experience to come in and solve a quite defined problem. And usually it can be a person that the company does not have access to that type of knowledge and skills themselves. Um, they might not have uh, the ability to hire such a person full time. So you plug that person in for that period, and then the person goes out again when the scope of the engagement has been finalized and hopefully been very successful.
what's the difference between fractional and freelance then?
Oh, I don't know actually.
Isn't that it's you know what I think?
Yeah,
I think it's sounds better with fractional than
yeah,
freelance,
yeah,
because
yeah,
what we do ain't free, right?
yeah,
So you
exactly.
don't want to put that into the mind of the customer, and that like when you said full time versus short time, wouldn't it like with consulting a lot of times it's more expensive, right, than to hire someone full time?
Yeah,
So when does that ROI make sense?
yeah,
Because like
yeah.
how
So
do people resonate from that?
yeah, I also think that when you look at the interim role, that is a person coming in and doing that role interim for a period of time with the full responsibility
Mm,
of a hire that a person hired in that role would have, while the fractional is coming in to deal with a certain issue.
okay.
So it's more about the scope. But I've been both fractional and interim.
I think we're gonna do just a little bit like that. Was that okay? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I've been doing both fractional and interim and not been really big difference.
yeah,
So it's more a definition.
okay.
I think for a fractional, any company considering using a fractional role, and this is my experience and my opinion,
Mm,
it has to be that the person comes in and owns KPIs and results.
okay.
To have that ownership to the numbers, you can't just come in and just be strategy work and PowerPoint making,
No,
right?
that does make sense, because that's also like, okay, who's gonna do the work? But does that then tie into the compensation model? Like, so if like if you hit X, you solve this problem, you get paid, the full scope, and if you don't hit that number, you get less. Is that how it works
I
as well
think
then?
for me it has been more like I've had a type of retainer
Mm,
with a company that we agree on. But of course, the success of my work has very much been tied
Mm.
to the success of finalizing those areas that we agreed on, but also me owning the results, the forecast, having the team report to me
Yeah.
with all the types of operational responsibilities I would have. So it's almost like a part of the company for that period of time.
So that's, you need to be part of the company. You need to have a clear KPI that's set on you. You need to be having a clear problem that you need to solve. And I guess also maybe the company, like, doesn't it a lot of the times then happen that they want to just hire you because they're like, oh my God, Birte, you're amazing. Can't you just come in here full time?
That's happened.
That's happened.
That
Yes.
has happened. It's a fantastic compliment, and I think that that's probably the best grade a fractional CRO in this case can get.
But you don't want to do that.
You should never say never. Um, and but until now, I'm so excited about the opportunity to enter into all these fantastic tech companies that has some issues that I have experience and knowledge to solve. And to get that exposure is the thrill of the job for me at the moment after having been employed for 20 years. So up until now, I still am very motivated to be in these companies for a period of time and be super committed to solve whatever that the issue is,
Mm.
and then step out. But it doesn't mean that the moment that I step out of the role, that I step out of the company completely.
No.
So I usually have an agreement where we follow up the initiatives that we have been implementing, because the implementation part doesn't end at a certain date. So then I follow up on those
Yeah, because
for a period of time.
that must be like, the success is also like one thing that I felt that was a little bit hard when I was doing some fractional VP of sales,
Yeah.
yeah, was that when I was in the company, like whatever I said, I could, I had the responsibility and I had the mandate to make it happen.
Mm.
So when I
Mm.
was there, I had the one-on-ones, I had the forecasting. If you didn't do what I said last week, there was a consequence to that. But as soon as I went out, it kind of went, I felt like a lot of the times the sales team went back to the lowest common denominator from before.
Yeah.
So it's like really hard to raise the level on that short period of time.
Hmm.
I guess maybe I should have been there longer, but that's to make sure that it's actually working. You need to have some kind
Yeah.
of follow up,
Yeah.
right?
And there's a lot of learning I've done uh, throughout the past 2.5 years as well. But one of the things I've done in all the fractional engagements I've had is to ensure that I find my own replacement.
Okay.
And if there's not a VP of sales there, also hire that person
Mm.
and ensure that we have a super strong team with everything that entails when I leave.
Because if not, I mean, your reputation also, like when you're doing this, what's the average time period? 6 months, 12
Now it's
months?
been 6 to 9 months has
Yeah.
been the average.
So, I mean, if you don't have a success story, especially in this like Nordic markets, it's quite small, right? So,
Exactly.
okay, so that's been like a prerequisite. So if you don't find that person in 6 to 9 months, do you like then extend for another 3 months or
It
how?
hasn't happened yet.
Okay,
I've
good.
been lucky enough
Yeah.
to find my replacement either internally
Yeah.
or externally. So until now, that has worked really well. And then I think actually that then the fractional CRO in this case is worth its weight in gold.
What has been the biggest like transformation that you've seen in some of these companies? Like, what has been the biggest impact that you have?
I think that with the companies that I've been working with, they have been very founder led when I came in.
Mm.
So it's all about kind of that superstar culture where you have a few individuals that's doing all of the revenue. And we need to make the transition from that superstar led growth or founder led growth into a more process oriented organization, because if you want to scale, you can't scale individuals.
No.
And in the beginning of a company's growth, you have a few very unique, super productive individuals, and that is so hard to scale and find and replicate.
Mm.
So what we want to scale is what they do, and to translate that into a process that others can copy, so that you don't need that level of talent when you hire more people. As long as you know what success looks like, what and you have documented what works, you can replicate that and you scale the process. And then you have to add a data model to that. Because you cannot know if you have a repeatable process before you have a data model proving that in numbers. So that is a second very important part of an engagement like that, to ensure that we have a really good data model so that we can track our way to repeatability in numbers.
I have so many questions on this, and in like a lot of ways. But let's just start with the data model, because that was the last part. When you say data model, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. It could mean anything, right? But it basically means the ability to track the metrics. I will explain what I mean with that as well. All throughout the whole revenue lifecycle. And it's not just the win rate that we focus so much on in sales, right? From we have an opportunity to close one.
Mm.
There's that is the KPI most companies know about. But there's that is just a part of a whole funnel of metrics that we need to identify and track. So we need to be able to track all the conversions from lead all the way to closing. That's the acquisition side of the bow tie. And then in a recurring revenue business, the magic actually happens on the recurring revenue side, which is the client success side.
Mm.
And you also need to keep tracking the prospects from closing all the way to the recurring revenue side. So that it's 3 conversions or 3 metrics that we're tracking. One is the volume metrics. So how many leads do we need in order to close one deal? And how many leads does it take to get one expansion client, to standardize that? We're tracking the time metrics, of course, the cycles. It's not just the sales cycle we're tracking. That is from we have an opportunity to close date. There's time metrics throughout the whole funnel as well. And then it's the conversion metrics.
Mm.
So all of those 3 needs to be tracked from lead all the way throughout the sales funnel till we close the deal, to adoption, to renewal, and to expansion.
So that's like that's the data model to get that under control. Like, okay, we need to have these 3 different metrics: volume, leads, time. But you said that we're going from founder-led or like A players that I guess then are doing all the work, and they don't necessarily even know what they're doing right. They just like it comes naturally to them, like, because that's the way they're built.
Yeah.
Um, is it then, like, is it hard to convince the founders that change needs to happen? Like, because like that's something that when you said we need to change this, like a lot of the times I see that you do a little change. It's back to what I just said previously. Like, you go back to the common denominator. You go back to what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
So how has that been with these founders? Like, we need to change. We need to put these data models, have these metrics in place
And processes, right?
and processes, and have professionalize our organization. How is that change management conversation going with the founder?
That is a great question, because that's also a part of the engagement that takes a lot of time as well. But I have to say that my boss in this engagement is, up until now, has been the board and the CEO. So they want this.
Yeah.
I think that is very important, that you have that executive alignment, that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? So they have already identified that change needs to happen, and that they need some external help in terms of driving it. So that is a good place to start. But still, these people are, been super successful selling individually and taking the company up to a certain level. And of course, to convince and explain why it's time to do things differently, to start documenting what they do, and maybe pull out of the process a little bit and start scaling their process and put more effort and time into training others. That is something that needs to be explained, because the word process has like a negative association. I think a lot of companies then think that it's then we become very corporate. That is the least thing we want. We don't want to lose the creativity, the whole purpose that we're all aligned towards, and try to almost take that word process out of the mix,
Okay.
because I wish there was another word for it. So just to explain that it's just to summarize everything that we have seen that has worked on a repeatable basis. So it's not me coming from the outside with a process
No.
where they're going to do things completely different.
We're just mapping what you're
We're just
already doing.
mapping what you guys have been doing, what has been working, what's best practice here in this company. And we put it down on paper so that others can repeat it.
Yeah.
So that the founders or the individuals don't need to be in every deal, because that's unscalable, right? But it's quite painful, because one of the weaknesses of being a leader or a high performer or very productive is that it's people that are doers that get shit done.
Yes.
Which is fantastic. But once you want to scale, that can become a weakness, because what do?
Hug it.
Then, I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
I do it faster. I know exactly what to do.
Sit back, have a look.
Yeah, and that and to take that decision to take a step back and watch others do things a little bit slower, a little bit more cranky in the beginning, and just trust that they will get into it and give them the chance, is of course a challenge. So I need to implement that discipline and show them it's the right thing to do. And until now, I've been lucky enough that they've been very aligned on that. It takes some time, just a few conversations, just for it to make sense. It's super smart people, right? So you need to put some love and care into how you communicate and explain that this is the right thing.
And how long, like, well, I guess first question is, when is it a good time to have this conversation for a company? Like, do you know by revenue? Do you know by sales team?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Jacko Founder Koi's revenue architecture. So there will be quite a few referrals to that. And any SaaS company goes through a growth curve, which has an S shape with 12 milestones that you have to check off. All of those, you can't skip one. They come in a certain order. So when I enter into these companies, I actually use that to just understand, where is this company on the growth curve. You can look at the revenue, but most importantly is how many of the milestones have they achieved.
Okay.
And then when we identify that, which I usually take 2 weeks to do, so that's the first thing we do, and go in, and there's a hypothesis, right, of the problem, but still I want to go in and make my own opinion and find the root cause, so we're not just dealing with symptoms. And then that's what I do, to just figure out the composition of the revenue, and also the milestones that they have achieved, because then we know exactly where to start. And then I present my conclusion and my mapping to the leadership team, and then we hopefully agree that that's the right thing to do, and then we start explaining what needs to happen. So
And-
it's quite immediate, actually.
But so there's 12 different milestones. So is it like, do you come in at like the third milestone or the sixth milestone? Or what is these milestones?
Yeah. So I think it's a coincidence that the 3 fractional roles I've had throughout these 2.5 years have been in the founder-led stage, and that's actually one of the milestones. The first one is pricing and packaging. That, you need to have that in place.
Yeah. Can't sell anything without
So
that.
first you have the product market fit phase,
Yeah.
of course, and then you have the pricing and packaging. You have that settled to close to start closing deals. Then you have the founder-led stage, and to exit out of that, you need to make sure that the founder is taking step out of the process and you're starting to scale what is working.
Mm.
And then you have to look at your go-to-market model. That's the third.
Mm.
So how many segments are we selling to? How many products do we have out in the market?
Mm.
How many markets are we in? All of those are individual revenue engines in the revenue factory,
Mm.
right? And that is focus areas. And one of the biggest scaling failures is to focus on too many things.
I can relate to that.
So
Sitting here in a podcast.
Yeah, so each and every of these revenue streams can make a lot of sense as their own entity, and you should almost handle them as a company in itself. But with a small team that these companies usually have, right, you're stretching out your resources and diluting them a lot with having all of these focus areas. And it's easy to think in an early stage that the more stuff we do, the total revenue number should be a good one.
Mm.
But speed is actually captured through focus.
Mm.
And up to $10 million, you should have one motion, because you have to build an ICP, a repeatable process, a data model for each of them. And I think the best example is to look at a small marketing team, because they're usually quite small, at least in the beginning,
Mm.
for them to market all of these motions in a really good way. That's a lot,
Mm.
right? So that is another thing we need to look at. How many emotions do you have, and which one can we focus on and gain speed? Because all we want is to learn how to sell and gain that speed, because that's when the S curve starts to get another angle.
So would you say that one of your...
Do you remember where we?
No, I have no idea now, but it's okay. Because one of the things
Yes,
that...
we talked about the ICP and
Yes,
focus, and the
ICP and
decision
focus.
to actually start scaling off the onion and make those tough decisions.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's where we were, and
Yeah.
and that ICPs are people are more they're more clear that more doesn't necessarily mean better, and I think that's one of the things that I could see as a manager in Salesforce, for example, that every year we had these new territories, right? And and we had to grow minimum 25% every year. That was that, or else bad things happened. And every year I hired more people because I didn't want to give my team individually 25% increase on their targets when they already had $1 million in target. But if I hired one more person, everybody could have $1 million. It's usually it's okay. But that also meant that the territories became smaller.
I can see a lot of problems with that approach.
Yes, there's a lot of problems with that approach. But there was one of the in terms of the focus was that you basically got a smaller and smaller territory, and every year the AEs were say, Anders, how am I going to get my target now when my territory is smaller? And every year they were more focused and they could perform better with their accounts that they had.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's very, because and especially when it comes to enterprise sales.
Yep.
Sure, if you have high velocity sales, there's a break-even point somewhere where you need to have enough prospects to dig in. But I can definitely see that focus leads to better execution as well.
Yes, 100%. So that is a decision that also needs to be made, and for the sales team to understand that the focus actually helps in gaining speed, and there is a transition period to buy into that also needs to be counted into the fractional role, right? But I have one example of one of the companies I worked for as a fractional CRO, and one of the salespeople, so they were working towards a very broad ICP, and one of the salespeople told me that he had spent 6 months just to learn, each ICP, and within each ICP, there's a certain amount of buying personas, that you also need to be an expert in, right?
Jesus.
So the ramp time with all these focus areas also gets longer because the salespeople need to learn all this stuff to really, really hone in on the messaging and the personal outcomes that they want to see from whatever platform or service we're providing.
Yeah, and it's also when you come to the outbound, you know, like because I always said to my teams that, and that's because how I related to myself was that I want to be in control of my destiny.
Mm.
So great that you have SDR, BDR, motion, or marketing and agencies or whatever, which you have in big companies. In small companies, you don't. But I wanted to prospect enough, so I had enough pipe to get to target for myself.
Mhm.
But if you then have so many different buying personas when you then cold call or do outreach, that mental switch from like, oh, I'm now talking to the CIO or I'm now talking to the CMO or the whoever CXO, it it creates a little bit of a friction that it's not so easy to
Yeah,
switch in. So I can,
exactly.
you know, that efficiency gain by having more buying personas quickly eradicates
Yeah, and
for
I think that is one of the biggest or most common issues I see when I come in is that they have too much going on.
yeah.
And they do averages in terms of numbers, right? They have the average deal size across all of these motions.
Okay.
The sales cycle is the average of all the motions.
Yeah.
So you're not really an expert in any of your revenue streams. And that also makes it very complicated to diagnose which one we have the best velocity in.
Mm.
Because when we scale, we look for speed.
Yes. Speed is the currency of business, as Mark
And if you
Benioff
look at
says.
the sales velocity formula, sales cycle is in the denominator.
Okay.
So it actually becomes more important than the number of opportunities, the win rate, and the deal size. So the time metric
Yeah.
is very important.
So if you would then start a business, then you would the key message is then less is more.
Mm.
Like you know,
Find focus.
find focus and then it maybe doesn't even matter what you focus on that much. You know, like okay, for me, cold calling is my hammer because that's you know my how I've been brought up. So you know, just do that and then continue. And if you're if you're in the e-commerce, you're probably gonna be Facebook marketing person. You
Yeah.
know, like so. Then that's your hammer. Or when
I
you
think,
find your
but you have, in a company's growth journey,
yeah
we also have the product market fit phase.
yeah
That is the phase where we do unscalable things.
mm,
That is the phase where it's allowed to, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks.
mm,
That is kind of the purpose. The product is in focus and gaining feedback on the product to gain that product market fit.
yeah
So probably when you enter into the go-to-market fit phase, then you should have done all of these unscalable things. And the job is to figure out of all the things that we've been doing, where should we focus,
yeah.
right? And that needs to be a more scientific approach to that, to understand where that speed can be gained and where focus should lie.
So we're moving away then from the gut feeling decisions because we now, you know, I talked to a PE firm many years ago and they said that they got 25% more in sales price when they had Salesforce implemented in their
Oh, wow.
portfolio versus not. And I was like, as a Salesforce employee, I love that, and as a Salesforce stock owner, I still love that. But you know, like you I guess that's the same thing, right? You maybe as a first-time founder, you don't think about those metrics. You don't think about that as much because there's so many fires to put
Yeah,
out.
and usually founders are very product oriented because that's where everything starts. It
Yeah.
starts with a problem that you're passionate about solving,
Mm.
and for a period of time, that's your only focus. And also, when you hire salespeople in this stage, it's almost like a mix between a salesperson and a product manager because you want to go out in the market, get feedback on the product, and fuel that into the engineering team as soon as possible.
Mm.
And that is kind of your focus. And I think That is why when you enter into the go-to-market fit phase, which is when you learn how to sell this, that there can be some challenges when it comes to the commercial side of that product, how to go to market with it,
Yeah.
and how to have that more outside-in perspective, where there's another skill set that is needed. And then you go to a third growth phase, which is the scale-up phase, where there's a third skill set needed, because then you probably have the processes established, and then it's more about sales excellence, optimization, right? Because then you have, in the beginning, you have a few people that you manage, and it's I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easier to keep productivity high on each rep.
Yeah.
But the more people you bring in, the bigger you become, the sales per rep becomes and productivity becomes your main metric.
Yes.
And of course, sustainability and cost, that you combine your metrics with a cost perspective so that you become profitable, because once you go IPO, that's all that matters. So you
Yes.
need to start practice that during a certain phase as well. So then that is a third type of skill set that needs to come into the organization.
Yeah, and that's also why you can't just throw more boots on ground, right? You need to make sure that you have
and that is when you go back to the data model and the bow tie. If you look at the math in sales, it's easy to think that if we just put more leads or people in to the bow tie,
Yeah.
then we increase all the conversions by the number of units. But you can only get linear growth out of that.
Because also to explain, like the bow tie is basically a funnel that is flipped 90 degrees.
Yeah, so just explain it. It's the bow tie looks at the whole revenue funnel and all the metrics, all the way from awareness and leads to the sales phase, the sales and acquisition side, and and that is the classical sales funnel that everyone is very used to seeing. But the bow tie has the flipped funnel on the client side. So once you close the deal, it's all about onboarding. One of the biggest reasons for churn is bad onboarding, and the adoption phase and the expansion phase. And we want to close clients on the acquisition side that follows that revenue pattern, because in the SaaS business, it's about expansion and have the clients renew to a higher amount every year, for example, and then you get that compounding revenue effect.
Exactly,
and that is the most important accelerator of growth. And I think more and more investors look at that metric. We run around back in the days with the logo slides.
Yes.
The more logos, the better.
Yes.
I'm more keen on how good is this company at onboarding, retaining, and expanding this. So it's rather have less logos and really tell that fantastic story than the amount of logos you're able, because that is that you manage to close them, right? But the value is really in retaining and expanding them.
So when you said earlier in the beginning here, you said like the magic is in the customer success side. Is that what you mean then? Like to make sure that the net retention rate is really high?
Yeah, and the magic happens throughout the whole bow tie. It needs to be alignment that all of those functions are needed and are superstars in their own way. But when it comes to the ideal customer profile, who is this company's best clients? You can figure that out when you look at your client base. You can do cohort analysis, or you can look into the revenue pattern, because we want to see those clients that are easily onboarded, and they're adopting the platform, they're renewing and expanding and showing that expanding revenue effect. That revenue pattern, what are the attributes of those clients? That is our ICP. And that information needs to go back to the marketing team and the sales team, so that they are super informed, so that we keep finding that prospect and we disqualify the others. So we keep fueling in
good prospects.
Yeah. And that is the whole magic about looking at the revenue. I like to say the revenue team.
Yeah.
With all the functions working together. Because if the CS team and we talk about, the misalignment. If the CS team sits with that information
Mm.
and not informing,
The sales team and marketing team.
or the sales and marketing not interested in it,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
could be, so it's no one's fault.
Yeah.
Could go both ways. That is a clear sign of misalignment.
Mm.
And then actually the sales team can kill NRR,
Yeah.
right? Because we get so focused on win rate and
Mm.
closing those deals. I have hundreds of examples, and I'm guilty as charged as long
Yeah.
as I was a hunter, which I've been. Then, we have different views based on our metrics on who is the best client.
Is there anything that you now like? Is there anything that is clear for you as now when you're like fractional and you've been in 3 different companies in a short period of time that like, oh, this is obvious now that it wasn't obvious before?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we both have a background from Meltwater,
Yeah.
and I was in Meltwater for 11 years, and it's the most defining part of my career. Learned so much from that, mainly from all the mistakes that we made. I'm so thankful for those, but we also were able to fix them quite quickly.
Mm.
And in the beginning, it was bootstrapped, so it was all about earning the money before we spent them, and that naturally creates a strong focus on acquisition
Mm.
and running around with the logos.
Yeah.
And I just remember we had our own built CRM,
Yes.
and in the very beginning, we had this periodic follow-up coming in the CRM in magenta colors because it was called Magenta News. And I was just measured on closing deals. I didn't have time to do periodic follow-ups, right?
Yeah.
I did the onboarding and that I did, but the periodic follow-up, and we didn't have a client success team yet, which is understandable because it was all about getting those first clients in. But after a year, I had closed 100 clients.
That's insane. Also, Birte, like 100 clients in a year is amazing.
Yeah, maybe.
No.
No,
Yes,
but
it
it's
is.
100 clients, and I was
10
just thinking,
clients.
and we got that periodic follow-up, I think, every third month.
Yeah.
You multiply that with 100,
Yeah.
and you multiply that again with X amount of salespeople.
Yeah.
That equals a problem,
Yeah.
right? So we realized that, and we got our first client success person in, who started doing the periodic follow-ups for us, right? And then eventually we just understood that the majority of our revenue is on the clients in our client base,
Yeah.
right? And we need to have our most talented people, the people with the most product knowledge, because our clients will know the product so well once they have been a client for a while. So we need to have people that really are nitty-gritty with the product, that can take on clients that has big expansion potential. So I think my learning curve just realized that how important client success also is. You don't get that client if you don't have the people on the acquisition side. So I don't undermine any role.
No.
But it's just from my learning experience, and I can look back into the attitude towards the client success side. But I also think that Meltwater was one of the companies that built a CS team among the first SaaS companies that did that. I've heard people talking about CS was a role that was created in 2010.
Yeah. Well,
to me, then we had a CS team a long time ago.
Yeah. And I often I often go back to like what the setup that we had in Meltwater, with a customer success manager that was measured on sales, but there was a growth manager that was actually like the salesperson, so you could keep their roles separate. So everybody was measured on growing the client, but it was a nice it was nice for the client to know that one of the people that spoke with wasn't necessarily the one that wanted to close them all the time.
Yeah.
Like I really.
And we also had a fantastic process in the CS team with 6-month reviews that we did, that we made sure to close all the clients that were willing to renew as early as possible, so that we knew that the gap between our closed renewals and our NRR goal that's our upsell quota.
Yeah.
And the last quarter, that's what we did, right?
Yeah.
We renewed early and we made sure to hit that expansion target. So I thought that we became quite sophisticated. If you, at least if you look back into how long this is, how many years
Yeah.
back we are talking, a lot of things came through an organization that was able to make mistakes, but fix them quickly.
You were allowed to make mistakes as well. Like
Yeah.
that was also very cool, right? It
Yeah.
was no one was like disciplining you for making a mistake. It was like, okay, what did we learn from this?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, one of my first bosses in Salesforce, when I introduced me to him afterwards, like, hey, I'm Anders. He's like, I know who you are. I'm like, okay, why? Yeah, you're one of the few people that is on the phone all the time in the office.
Yeah.
And then it was like, and that sat from like the Meltwater days, like,
Yeah.
because, like you needed to talk to people in order to, bring value. And
Yeah,
it's,
and I think, there's a big issue now around pipeline generation, or
yes.
PG,
Yeah, PG.
these days, and we've gone through a phase in that aspect as well, where all of the automation and outreach tools and right with all the sequences and things that has been working for some years, but now that's getting the effect of that is definitely declining. We're not reading all of those emails anymore.
No, and also
And
like with all the AI tools, it's like the everything feels A/B tested to a million, and then you're like, this is not even written by a
yeah,
person.
and I'm not even reading all the emails I'm
No.
getting every day.
No.
And just like you, having been successful in sales with the phone as my main tool, I think we need to go back to the phone.
Yes.
I think that one, and now this might be provoking out there, and this is my opinion,
Yeah.
but I think that one of the challenges around PG is that there's been a lot of leaders that's grown up in the sequence world,
Okay.
where kind of picking up the phone has not been as important,
Mm.
right? So there's a lot of excuses why you should not pick up the phone.
Oh, and I know that Birte Steen loves excuses.
It's that is where I have a strength and a weakness. Yeah, I think that making excuses is one of the most dangerous parts in if you really want to be successful in something. We have to talk about what we can control and not waste our own or others' time talking about things we can't control. If you're really serious about being successful. And
So-
if you don't like that, then sales is not the perfect place. Because it's also one of the easiest jobs to find excuses, right? Yeah, so I'm allergic to those sales meetings where people sit and talk about excuses.
How do you then hire?
I probably sound very harsh when saying
No,
that.
no, but I was shutting up because I was like, this is a great soundbite. It's because I 100% agree, and it's the thing is that it does work now. Awesome, like there's some awesome tools out there with like parallel dialers and power dialers. Like I'm using it, and I understand that if you don't have that it's really tough. Like because I mean, calling 40, 50 people, dials an hour and not getting anything, for 8 hours, that is soul sucking. But if you do the work, it does, pay off. And it's, and like I grew up in the cold calling game, and every time I don't do it for a while, I feel this anxiety in my stomach. I
That
was
you
like,
lost the skill.
yes.
Yeah.
And I need to get the reps in.
Yeah.
I am like a stuttering teenager in the
Yeah.
beginning, and I'm like ashamed of myself. Like, what are you even
You need to
doing?
get warmed up, right?
Yeah.
With all the objections
Yeah.
and get some punches in the face. I
100%.
also need that. It took me always, I needed 10, like 2 or 3 or 4 pickups and conversations, of course, because
Yeah.
the pickup itself isn't necessarily a conversation, to get warmed up in terms of being sharp. But I also think that it's, except from the excuses that we stop with, right? It's all in the preparations. Because if you're super prepared, you know who you're calling, your pitch is relevant, people will listen. You don't need to have 100 pickups.
No, but it depends on which market you will
Yeah,
call
yeah.
into as well, I would say. But it's
That is
because,
true.
yeah,
That I'm very open to the fact that we have differences in the market, but I also have to tell you a really cool meltwater story again.
yeah,
And when we were expanding into UK, so we expanded to Sweden and UK simultaneously, and the expansion to Sweden, that's where I was a part of, into Stockholm. That worked immediately. But Jörn Lyseggen started by hiring a few British people, flew them over to the Oslo office, have them there for 3 months, training them, getting adapted to the culture and the way of working, and then flew back to UK. And it did not work.
Mhm.
They had fantastic backgrounds, when it comes to qualifications, nothing to uh, pin down in terms of not being qualified to do the job. So we had to restart that expansion and flew down 3 Norwegians with like no preconception of cold calling not working in the UK market, and they hammered the phone and it worked.
yeah.
I'm not saying maybe it was a one-time incident,
I think
but
if you do the work, it usually does work. I mean, what I'm coming from is that, um, if we tie it back to ICP, like if you have multiple ICPs, you have multiple buying personas, then you will have multiple ways of opening your pitch.
yeah,
And when you're then already feeling a little bit uncomfortable, then there's, the evil force of resistance. Every time you need to do something that is good for you, resistance comes in. If
yeah,
that is, tied into six packs, or health, or cold calling,
yeah.
it's the same evil force.
That's when the excuses come up.
A lot of it, because that's the little voice, resistance coming. It's like, you don't need to send that
Yeah.
email.
Yeah.
That it's they're gonna pick up another
Yeah.
time instead. But if if you have one ICP, one buying persona, then it's
Exactly.
easier to
And now you're
battle that
now you're going
resistance.
back to why that is so important, right? Why that focus is so important. Because if you have multiple ICP multiplied by the number of buying personas you need to be an expert in for them to listen to you when you pick up that phone.
Yeah,
But I also want to nuance my assumption here about the cold calling. Of course, not the phone is not working in silo.
no,
It's the combination of channels.
yeah,
I just feel that the phone has dropped down to the last option instead of being the first. That's
yeah,
all I'm saying. That you need to start trusting the phone again, because now I've been testing this, at least in the companies that I've been honored to help, really, really tracking what channel works the best. And I'm just saying completely neutrally, in all those companies, cold calling has worked best.
yeah, and it's
And
also
we can discuss a lot of things around that, but that is a fact.
yeah, but it's also like all the data is showing that as well. Like,
Yeah.
it's also like people get very passionate, and it's as we said earlier, like my hammer is cold calling, so I like that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that email doesn't work, or doesn't mean
Exactly. That's so
like
important.
it's like
It's the magic of combining these tools, right?
Yeah.
And also implementing into your operational rhythm, right? So that you have weeks that are quite defined in terms of what activities we do throughout the week. We have maybe our forecasting meeting on Mondays, maybe our pipeline meetings on Tuesday or whatever, and then we have our cold calling day on Wednesday, and we do it together and all those kinds of things. That because it's a bit of the harder part of the job, so it's more fun to do it together, and
Yeah.
that you build into your operational rhythm of how we do things around here.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's important that you do it. I think,
Yeah.
like, because it's very easy, and from my own experience, I was looking at my year in review now, and like when you're building things, you're trying to do like we're two people doing everything. So then it's like, oh, right now we're building a new product in a new segment. So, and because one of the clients wants that, then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that took. So I was like, 1 month without cold calling, and then you're like, that cannot happen. Like it's, because then the engine dies, right?
Yeah.
There's no oxygen in the
Yeah.
pipe, as we
Yeah,
used to say.
exactly. Yeah.
But so I think whatever it is that you are doing, just make sure that you do it, and then like, I think we're a little bit biased, but the data shows it as well. So do put phone in it. Also, do put voicemails in, especially if you can automate that. It doesn't need to be long. Just say that you called, so they
Yeah.
remember you.
Yeah.
Like, and then send a follow-up email
Yeah.
saying like, I just tried to call you.
Exactly.
Do it on LinkedIn as well. The more channels, the better.
Yeah.
And don't, like, just do the work, I think,
Yeah.
is the key thing.
And I see just too many sales process being 100% driven over email.
Yeah.
I'm amazed by that.
I did that in Thailand because they didn't speak very well
Oh, that,
English.
you know,
So then
then,
that was,
yeah.
that worked.
But it's just interesting to see how common it is that
Yeah.
you drive a full sales
Yeah.
process over email. And
Yeah.
just imagine if you think about all the questions, the objections, and you're dealing with them over email. How many emails? And then you send the answer. You wait for the answer. It might take a day or two, or no answer at all.
Yeah.
And all of those emails, instead of, you can deal with all of that in the conversation.
And also the objection. Like, I get nervous when I hear that people do that as much, because it's like I don't want to do this. Goodbye is so easy to do over email. There's no consequences for the person on the other side to never talk to you again. And salespeople, we're not the most favorite people in the world. Like, we're trying to solve a problem, but it's not always that the other person on the other side of the table looks at it that way. They
Yeah.
didn't even know that they had a problem. So, oh, we can increase your revenue by 20%. Don't talk to me, you're a magician. You're going to make me sign a contract without me knowing it.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears a
Yeah.
little bit. What like, we want to make sure that we're also spending the time on the right opportunities, because like, outbound is harder, PG is harder, it takes longer time to get a hold of them. So when we finally got this opportunity that we're working on, we also need to be predictable in our forecasting. So like, when you're going into these organizations and you're doing big changes, you're going from founder-led to more process focused, or just taking what's working better.
Yeah.
How is your views on forecasting, and what do you see is the common mistakes that organizations are doing?
Yeah, and that goes beyond my fractional work. I think I've been working now 20 years in B2B SaaS. So I see that forecasting is a skill that needs to be improved in general. And it needs to gain more focus than it has on a general basis. I think that as a sales leader, forecasting your business accurately is one of the most important parts of your job. Full stop. And if you are forecasting incorrectly, to me, it's a sign that you are not intimate enough with your team or not in control. So that is kind of the outcome, how accurately you forecast. That is kind of the outcome of whether you're process oriented, are you qualifying well enough, right? Do we know where we are in the deal, what's left in the deal, and do we define what the closable deal, what the commit is in the same way? And I also think there's a lacking understanding very often of how important accurate forecasting is for the company.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is our ability to predict the revenue, and also that prediction is something we need to be able to make decisions on. So it's not about, it's easy to think it's about hitting your number, but it's also about helping the company grow and make decisions based out of our forecast and prediction. So it's just so important. I just see a lacking ability or maybe understanding of teaching the sales team that how important it is.
Is it because the founders doesn't know it either?
I don't want to blame anyone, but of course this comes into maybe a lacking experience on the commercial side.
Because you said earlier, like they focus so much on the product side,
Exactly.
then it's very natural that they haven't focused on the commercial. And if they don't have focus on
Yeah,
that, they
it's just a
haven't.
natural development. And in order to be to have a repeatable process, it starts with a repeatable process. You get that proven in numbers that yes, our trend line is flattening out. We become repeatable, we become scalable, and we are then predictable, right? So it's kind of the outcome, whether we have reached that level. And if you have high variation of sales results throughout quarter to quarter, you probably don't have a repeatable process yet.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of my heartfelt topics, where in all of the engagements, all my sales jobs, forecasting has been kind of the core grade in how well we're doing on everything when it comes to sales.
So what's the 80/20? Like, what is it? If I am a founder out there that has been product led and and I haven't done commercial sales as much before, like what is the top 3 things I should do in a forecast call? Or what is it that how can they improve better?
Yeah, I think I need to think. So first, one of the first mistakes I see is that you confuse weighted pipeline with a forecast.
And explain that.
Yeah.
What does that mean then?
Yeah. So you need to have, in order to be number driven, you have to have a sales process. So that's the place to start. And in these founder led companies, that might not be in place yet. So that is a very important place to start, to make sure that you have documented every single stage of your process from qualification to closing.
Yeah.
In order for us to make sure that we have one way of selling that is aligned, we have one common language for what is a closable deal. That can be a problem as well, right? That very positive and optimistic person forecasts in a certain way, and another that is more skeptical and more conservative forecasts the same deal completely different. And we need to have one common language and definition of what is a commit.
Yeah.
Or in each stage of the forecast. So that is a very important place to start. Another one is to have a good qualification framework. And then there's many out there. I'm a big Medic fan. It works well for enterprise, but there's many out there. The importance is that definition of how we define the criteria that we have to nail in order to close a deal. And everyone is aligned with that, so that we are very certain on what has been done in this deal and what is left to be done. Because the difference between the pipeline, which consists of all our deals structured in stages with percentage probability of closing, and your weighted pipeline is just multiplying your revenue number with that percentage, right? And you have like a prediction of the value of your pipeline at the moment. That is not the forecast.
No.
And the reason why it's not a forecast, it says nothing about timing.
No.
It says nothing about when are we able to close these deals. That is the difference. So you need to train your organization to be able to predict when a deal will be able to close.
One of my old bosses, he said that I don't give a single thing about the value right now.
Exactly.
Because we are not predictable, so we need to have timeline.
Yeah.
And you can give, and then like, oh, how are we gonna force the clients to or the prospect to commit to that? Well, if they want to have a pricing that is something that they can take into consideration, you ask them, when will you be able to sign this? And then they say, oh, I don't know when to do that. And then you just say, okay, I can give you a general pricing, and you can get that whenever you want. If you want to sign tomorrow or in 6 months' time, that's the pricing. But when you're ready to tell me I can sign on the 15th of January, then you will get the 15th of January pricing.
Yeah.
But if you sign on the 16th of January, you will get the pricing I said before.
That is one way. That's a way of closing very based on price, and I've done it a lot of times, so it does definitely work. Another way of doing it is also to make sure that your sales process is aligned with the buying process, so that you have focus on helping the buyer through their buying process, and our sales process is so aligned with that. So when we are on stage 3 in our process, the buyer is also on stage 3.
So you work backwards from a compelling event that the client or prospect is having, and now we're just working towards this common goal.
Yeah, because I don't like to sell on price. I want to sell on value and build but still the timeline to me, that happens when in the discovery, I think you win or you lose a deal in the discovery phase.
Yeah.
And if you're able to focus on deeply felt pains, and you move away from the nice to haves,
Yeah.
and you invest a lot of time in that discovery phase, so you move slow in the beginning. If you're able to find that pain that has the biggest implication when solved, you're able to translate that into metrics.
Yeah.
And you are able to help them out and build a business case around that.
Yeah.
And you're able to involve the economical buyer early enough to be involved. And you have that compelling event. So what happens if you don't have it by a certain date?
But don't you feel like compelling event is one of those things that is, almost a holy grail in many sales processes?
Yeah, I think the magic lays in the ability to translate value into metrics and dare to talk about financial terms. Because if that becomes attractive enough, urgency comes as a result of that, and the timeline comes as a result of that.
Which means that the business that you're talking with also have a prioritization and a business need to buy, whatever it is that you're solving, right? Which is, I think, one of the biggest failures of many salespeople is that they don't dare to qualify out. Like they want to keep it in because, as a comfort blanket, I rather have 3.5x pipe coverage because then I feel safe. But the real pipe coverage is 1x because
And
you're just
that
having...
is also one of my passions, because of course we want the pipeline coverage and times 3 or
whatever makes sense to your
whatever
business.
makes sense, right? But that is also can work against the focus on disqualifying.
Yeah.
Because if you are rewarded if you have quarterly quotas, for example, and for almost 3 months you're rewarded for that big pipeline, that is contradicting to disqualifying things out, because that will have a negative impact on your coverage, but probably a lot better effect on your win rate. So it depends on, you get what you ask for and what you measure.
Yeah.
And if I would have to choose between pipeline coverage and win rate, then I know which one I would go after. And you run very quickly into the time and effort fallacy. And that means that we think that the more time and effort we put into something, the more successful we become.
Yeah.
So we keep spending more and more time on deals that we have worked on for a long time, right? And we keep talking about them in the forecasting meeting. But it's when I say that you need to put a lot of effort and invest a lot of time in the beginning of a sales process, that is all about qualifying. So that you are almost proud of yourself if you were able to identify and ask those tough questions.
Yeah.
That means that this will probably not close, and be proud about yourself for daring to qualify that out, because you are then allocating time for other deals that have a higher probability of closing, and also having managers that reward that behavior.
And magic happens as well when you say to a prospect, based on what you're telling me right now, I don't think we're a good fit.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've said that. And then they open the doors and say, wait. I think you're wrong because, we tried to find these metrics. You didn't want to engage with me. Now I say you're not a good fit. Now you show me these metrics. I changed my mind. Actually, now when you're showing me these metrics, you have proven to me that this is a pain that is great enough for us to do
Yeah.
something with.
Yeah.
So it's like when you do that, there's a lot of good things. Weighted pipeline was one of the forecast fallacies. What was another thing that you see that people could be doing better when it comes to forecasting?
No process focus. They can have a process, but they're not following it, or they don't have a process, or they have a wrong process, right? Because that is categorizing the deal, and we know how to progress that deal in the right stage, and it tells us something about what to do and when. And if you also then have defined some forecasting categories, whether it's best case and commit or whatever categories you define, then you also say what stages are included in your forecasting categories.
Yes.
That is completely missing very often.
I have a stage 2 in commit.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And also what commit means. To me, like commit, that should be 90% the probability of closing.
Within that time frame.
Exactly. And timing is, of course, super important. I think the reason why a lot of commits slip is because, and I think I read a benchmark from 2024 about a lot of deals slipping to 2025. It was one of the challenges back in 2024. And that I could just imagine all of the commit deals that are slipping, right? And the reason why, and I think a commit should just be in commit for a very short time.
Yeah.
And the reason why commits slip is because you haven't done that job of disqualifying and taking on all those tough questions throughout the process.
Yeah.
Because if you do that throughout the whole process is a disqualification process. In order to qualify into the next stage, you have to have done this. You have to have asked these questions. There should be very little left to deal with once in commit. It should be, in my opinion, we're just waiting for signature.
Yeah, it's at least you should have a paper process.
Or at least no surprises.
Yeah.
And then they shouldn't slip. Then they shouldn't be in commit for that period, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is also missing, and kind of the culture of disqualifying, using that disqualification framework, and how we talk about our deals, right? So that people talk about deals in the same way, and we are qualifying for the same things. We have one common language for it.
Yeah.
That is also something that is super important for accurate forecasting, and also for the leaders to dare and be a little bit tough on the deals, and have a culture where people understand that is actually love.
But the culture is so. I think in many organizations, the culture is not there to maybe learn. Like it's more of like because sales is very binary. Like you hit your number or you don't.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to go into this like metrics where we were like, are you hitting your number or not? And then, if the conversation only becomes towards that, then it very quickly falls out from the learning culture. And when you then have a conversation in a sales team where it's like, are you going to hit your number? What's your commit? Or the worst thing a sales leader can ever say is like, come on, put another 100K in commit. Like I just get so annoyed with that because like
I think we heard that before.
Yeah, like I've said it. I have said it. So like my former team mates where we're like, oh, he's sitting there on his high horse. But like if you do that, you have lost as a sales leader, I think, in the building the culture. And when you're working very big organizations or medium size, it's very hard to change that culture. But if you want to have a really good sales team, I think you need to have that embrace the culture of learning instead and saying like, we are doing this. It's celebrated to say that we are not having our commit because what is it? What's the reason for that? What can we then do to change that? Are we having, pipe generation issues, or are we qualifying the wrong way? Or like, instead of just putting this, commit blanket on a problem and then nothing's going to be solved. So
I completely agree with you. And I think you said it right. And I would leave a sales organization that was only focused on results, because that is the end of so many activities, right?
Yeah.
It's a lagging indicator, and what I want to see is a sales organization that is focused on the leading indicators, the here and now, and being able to identify the number one metric that has the highest impact on the results right now, and be super diligent on how do we have a process for that? How do we train people to improve that metric? What behaviors, skills needs to be performed in order to increase it? Do we have any performers that are really good on that metric that we can study and make sure that we train, and then we track that metric disciplined until we reach the level we want before we take the next initiative. And then we have something to celebrate besides end results.
Yeah.
And if you see someone improving, say it's the win rate, the deal size, sales cycle, whatever the main metric is, and you track that trend line over time, and you see it continuously improving, you know that your sales result will improve in the end, right?
Yeah.
So the go-to-market metrics to me is kind of holy grail, because it says something about here and now and where we are improving, and that sales leaders should be able to identify the number one metric at the moment that is the most important for our team at the moment. And also, to me, I think a sales leader's, at least the first line manager's, most important job is, 1, to be a fantastic recruiter, 2, to be a fantastic coach.
Yeah.
If you don't find time to do any of those 2 things, I think you need to look into what you are doing.
Yeah, and change that. So and so recruiting, right? Like, so what's your best tips on recruiting? Because that feels like a perfect way to screw a company up, to recruit wrong.
And also going back to that linear growth, right? That
Yeah.
it's easy to throw money at the problem. Leads or more reps.
Yeah.
But just remember the math in sales. You only get that linear growth curve from that. So if you want the more exponential growth curve, then you can look into your win rate, for example, because your win rate is the result of every activity throughout the sales process. Say that you have 12 meetings throughout the sales process, and you improve that with 2% each meeting. The win rate increases, by a lot.
Yeah, we don't do public math here. So
No,
like
exactly.
exponentially.
Exponentially, and you get the effect of marginal gains.
Yeah.
Right, where it's all about doing those, because the goal can feel so far away, right? Improving your sales number by this amount, or that feels so far away. But you need to make it meaningful to do some improvements every day. And that is the power of marginal gains. And you can see that in the incremental improvement that you get on the win rate, for example. By improving something, you identify what is this person missing out in the meeting, so we can increase the meeting excellence of that person, right? And you can track that improvement over time, and you can celebrate, and you can recognize that person for obviously doing the right things, walking outside comfort zone in every meeting, right? That is something to celebrate every week instead of waiting for that end result. Sorry, I get a little bit engaged in this, but it's...
No, but then it's so when you're done hiring then you need to have people that are willing then to be, pushed to do
coachable.
Coachable.
Yeah. So when it comes back to your, so the reason I interrupted your question with the math in sales is just make sure you're not only thinking that you can increase revenue by adding more people.
No.
Because then you're actually also pouring a lot of money on the problem and expanding that problem, right? So fix your metrics first, so that you have new salespeople coming into a machinery that is working. But once you are there, you have a repeatable process in place, you are predictable, and then it's, then you are very successful probably when you bring people in. You need to define your ideal candidate profile.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Ideal candidate
So
profile.
that's another ICP to
Yes,
remember.
yes,
And that is a very clear definition of what are the success criterias in people that are successful in this role. And that could be, of course, a mirror of the most successful salespeople you have in your team, if you have that, and kind of see what attributes, capabilities, habits describe them, and how can we pin that down into an ideal candidate profile.
yeah,
And then you need to also figure out, so then we have these capabilities, intrinsics, and all the skills that we are looking for.
yeah,
The second thing is, how do we qualify for that in a process? You have to decide that before you even start this recruitment process.
yeah,
And you decide in advance on, we ask these questions, maybe we do a case study here, who should qualify for what, so that when a candidate is going through an interview process, it's not the same interview 4 times,
no,
right? That we have agreed on what each person is testing for. Then the process itself can be so much more efficient. I think that the recruitment process should be no more than 2 weeks from beginning to end. It's since you have a process, it's easier to benchmark candidates towards each other. And the third thing is that you need then to be loyal to those criteria, because it's so easy to start liking people a lot, right? Oh, they went to the same school as me,
Yeah,
and they did the same sport as
halo
me,
bias.
right? And that it's just the start of becoming very biased, right?
Yeah,
But you need to stick to what are the criteria that make a person successful in this role, and actually have a scoring card for that. And when it comes to intrinsics and those kinds of things, I think one of the most some of the most important criteria to look for is what we have talked about: coachability. The job is not to come in here and just repeat what you've done until now,
follow the playbook.
right? It's to come in, and there's nothing wrong with having things to learn. I think when it comes to coachability and adaptability, I just see a lot that once you give people coaching, some people react because that means that they don't know something, and they see that as a failure. To me, there's no harm in not, that your job is to learn. You're new in the job, but it's a big mistake not to do anything about it.
Yeah,
Right? So you have that coachability. That is one thing, so that the coaching that we have built, the person takes that in with enthusiasm. The second thing is curiosity, because a coachable person takes in the coaching that we have planned. The curious person goes beyond that. So if they're sitting beside you, Anders, and you're doing a discovery call, they ask 10 questions. Why did you ask that? Why is that important? Because they know that they are going to act on that tomorrow.
yeah.
So that is so important.
This is so hard, right? Because now we have coachability and curiosity. Like, I know a lot of coachable, curious people that won't be A players in sales. Yeah. I have a massive chip on my shoulder. I feel like a lot of salespeople have chip on, like they come back from the chiropractor and say, sorry, that's permanent, mate. You're always going to have that. I also feel like they did something weird or obsessive when they were younger. So I sold shitloads of scratch lottery tickets as like a 12-year-old. Won like got to see like Norway, Switzerland at Ullevål, and I'm like, oh, I won this, like that's feeling that I'm like, oh, didn't you like train insane amount of like swimming or something like that? Like I feel like there's traits that comes again and again.
No, and it's not only those two things, right? So it's just, I still think it's super important to have those two traits, because we want to have an agile organization that's willing to make changes whenever whenever needed, and have a growth mindset more than that fixed mindset.
Yeah.
But then there's other. I mean, you need to be able to work hard. Unfortunately, it's still a very important part of, at least when you work in sales, and you need to be process oriented and really see the the value of a process, and be really interested in how to improve it, and see that as a skill in itself, because sales has become a very professional job.
Yes.
It's not kind of the sleazy sales guy anymore back in the days, right? It's very professional. It's very process oriented. It's super complex. You're talking with multiple stakeholders that have their own KPIs, and you need to change your messaging in terms of really matching with whatever personal outcomes they're hoping for. You're translating the value into metrics, building that into a business case, showing the proof points, whatever they need in order to validate this decision. And 40 to 60% of B2B buying decisions end in no decisions these days.
Inertia.
Right, so it's a really tough place to be in, and it's a very small pool of people that are successful in that. So of course, it's not just curiosity and coachability; it's a lot of other traits as well. But I think you need you have if you spend time in defining your ideal candidate profile, you look into your own team, and you try to translate the attributes and capabilities of the most successful people, and also the ones that have not succeeded, what are kind of the red flags. That is at least a very helpful tool in making sure we bring in more of that type of candidates, and be loyal to that.
We had a fun realization in Meltwater, sitting having Friday beers, when I was sent to Hong Kong. Jan Walle, I think, was sent to Boston, Storhaug to San Francisco, House to New York. And we were sitting there like congratulating each other, or everyone from Oslo, we're very proud. And then we were like, so you all have master degrees? And we just looked at each other.
Who asked that?
Like, because we had just had a recruitment, and that was
Yeah,
one of the criterias was that they had master degrees.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm a college dropout. Like I studied for 4 years, but I never finished. And then Valle is like, I never even started. And Lars House like, I have 6 months of journalism school. And like it turned out that every single one of us that was like the best and be sent out to like help out, none of us had the master that we were asking the new recruits to have.
Yeah.
It was so we're maybe a little bit of the wrong ICP.
Yeah, but I can also say that's why you need to have. I think that in the ideal candidate profile, you need to have some non-negotiables, right? That is, and I've hired almost all of those people that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I remember exactly that the degree part was an issue in this.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they also managed to compensate with something unique.
Yeah.
And one of the persons you said, for example, was not invited to an interview because he didn't have a higher education. And I remember him calling and saying that, yeah, I applied and I haven't been invited to an interview. And then I had to go through my notes and see why. And then I saw very quickly that, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, but we have like a minimum requirement of a bachelor degree, at least I think. And then this guy, he had opened 2 or 3 mega fleece stores, which is quite a good compensation for an education.
Yeah.
And done that very successfully. But that was actually not enough for me. But he also said, if I have to clean the toilet, this is my dream job. And if I have to clean the toilet, I'll take that job. If I can just come in and prove myself, I'll do it. That is a person that's willing to work super hard. That is a super coachable person. And I just had to meet him from that pitch.
And also, he picked up the phone and called you
outside the window.
Yeah, in a job where using the phone will be important. And I think like so many times now where people are trying to get also the job market in software sales right now is insane. One of my friends said he's never felt rejection like this, and he's been working in sales for 20 years, so he has felt a lot of rejection to trying to get a job right now. And it's like and he's so good, so he just landed one. But he said that in one of the LinkedIn jobs that he saw, he was one of the like 800 applicants,
Yeah.
for this enterprise software
Yeah.
role. It was
But these people that you mentioned are unique. Faktisk. Actually,
actually,
actually, because since I know them so well, and I just remember the recruitment process so well, and that we actually did discuss our ideal candidate profile and the criteria that they did not meet, and we tested them very, very diligently on it to find something that could compensate.
yeah.
So I think we still were quite loyal, but of course, we did step outside of those criteria then. But it's
How
good to see how things went. So it's not education is not everything, but then you need to compensate with whatever that education means.
and one thing that I think is a little bit hard is the couple of months after, especially in like enterprise sales, because like if someone does a good job in the first job, like a good job by having high quota attainment in the first year of an enterprise gig, probably something has happened before, like like because a deal cycle could easily be 6 to 12 months, so if not longer. So like, and in these startups and scale ups, you can't maybe afford to have a year without
No,
nothing, so
exactly.
how do you test, in the first 3 months if they
Yeah.
are a good fit or
Yeah.
not?
I think that an onboarding program should be built so that you have KPIs that can still be that a new hire can still be measured against, that it's not necessarily revenue again. Like
Mm,
it actually goes a little bit back to what we talked about before. The revenue that's the end result of a lot of activities. And you still have those activities that you can focus on, so that when you onboard someone, it's very clear what they're optimizing for in each stage of their onboarding,
mm,
and you're measuring them against that. And I think that when you have a new person coming in, it should be very clear what you expect from them from the very beginning,
mm,
right? Because that helps them also become a lot more coachable, because they know what knowledge they are expected to perform on.
So in the 3 month onboarding process, in an ideal situation, the candidate and the hire knows for each week what they are supposed to learn, and then have clear metrics that they have either achieved or not achieved during that week.
Yeah.
So it then like, now you're here, we didn't see this, why didn't we see that?
Yeah, and
And
you
then
do
you
the
can,
same type of performance management you would do if that was a sales result, right?
yeah.
And it's obvious in the beginning they need to do the pipeline generation and all the skill sets and knowledge they need in order to be able to build pipeline. That is the first piece of that the training should focus on.
Mm,
And then how do we measure that? That is your job as a sales leader to figure that out. What is a reasonable goal within the first month, for example, when it comes to pipeline generation? Maybe they should do their first high-level discovery call in front of you and a high-level demo in the first month. And that
yeah.
is a good leading indicator of how they're doing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to track those leading indicators and not wait until the full sales cycle, because then also maybe the probation period actually has passed and things become very hard.
Especially in Norway,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah, that's exactly.
possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I don't think that is the pod.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Birte.
it was a pleasure.
I have like we can do a part 2 as well, because
Yeah.
there's I think we went through like 2 out of the 6 topics that
Yeah.
we were talking about, but it was a lot of fun. So
Yeah,
thank you
thank
very
you for
much.
having me. It was a pleasure and fun to talk about and nerding around these topics.
Great.